see a game and wonder, what's all this then? I've told versions of this story before, as it is a common trope regarding me and visiting games that I saw when I was younger on shows like X-Play and Cybernet, or on websites like old GameSpot, before the Jeff Gertzman Kane and Lynch controversy, before the creation of Giant Bomb, if that gives you my age range. Without the latter of the TV shows, I wouldn't have seen the likes of Killer 7 and Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, two of my favorite hybrid first-person shooters, and I distinctly remember getting in trouble during my youth for being interested in Human Head Studios' Prey. Funnily enough, not because it was M-rated, but that's a whole nother can of worms that I would deem too personal for this stupid review show to go into. I didn't even play games on the PC at that time, but I was so wired into any gaming outlet, whether it be TV, magazines, or websites, just to see what were upcoming releases. Those days are long gone since the advent of a number of differing factors, mostly the proliferation of information on the internet, where essentially you don't have to be paying attention to have gaming news be brought to you. I do think that is a net positive, but as with a ton of things within the industry, there's always some level of shenanigans afoot, bringing me to today. Unbridled internet access at a young age brought me face to face with a number of games. Monster Girl Quest is probably the biggest example I can point to, but as usual, rummaging around in early YouTube for footage of DS games brought me to this trailer for a DSi title, the subject of the day. Equal parts horrified, as back then I wasn't the horror lover, and intrigued, the Granny trailer stuck in the back of my mind. Always to be returned to, but never dug deeper. Until now. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder to get your name in the credits, additional videos like thumbnail time-lapses and the Shootin reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't. I ain't your Uncle Remus. Look, there aren't a lot of fairy tale uncles, so I take what I can get. Zippity-doo-dah, Disney. I won't let you forget. While you might think I'll go into Destineer, seeing as former Bungie Vice President Peter Tomte founded the company, they served as the publisher, so their role in history isn't as great. They weren't in the trenches, so to speak, unlike Enjoy Up, who is the developer. And because publishers tend to handle the selling of the game as opposed to the actual design, it could have been anyone, especially since Destineer handled porting PC titles like Unreal 03 and 04, Age of Empires 2 and 3, and Tropico to Mac in the same breath that they slapped their name onto shovelware like John Deere American Farmer and We Wish You a Merry Christmas. I feel as if I'm reciting my Dementium video, as I didn't go into Gamecock Media there, but dims the brakes. Enjoy Up is the one in the hot seat today, though as a developer they are not exactly a household name. Doubly so since they are a small team in Spain, meaning wider game coverage isn't exactly on the cards here. At best, and having to rewrite this whole section because new information found its way to me, you get 1 to 2 interviews. At worst, I'm going down the rabbit hole. Like, Enjoy Up has a connection to the WiiWare remake of La-Mulana, but I only found that out after having jumped around the official website for the game to find a few development blogs covering the hassle that Nigoro had with publisher Nicalis, ultimately winding up with Enjoy Up basically saying, yeah, we'll publish the game over here and there. To bring this back to the current, the two names tied to the heart of Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue are Jorge Bedma and Julio Moruno. Their time in the industry goes back to around the late 90s, with Julio holding a lot of graphics jobs for titles on the GBA, while Jorge was the programmer, cutting his teeth with the likes of Radical Bikers on the PlayStation 1 and a few arcade games. If the box art of Radical Bikers doesn't tell you where we are, I'ma just say it's a living, which probably explains why what happened in 2005. From a direct interview with Julio on Gamic Entertainment's website, he had this to say: "The team of Enjoy Up is composed of 5 people plus 3 collaborators. It was created in 2005 by Jorge Bedma and I. At that time, we were developing a project, Chronos Twins, which Joby had dreamed up one day, and it was a very original game. They were probably wanting to eke out on their own, seeing as I'm assuming that working on a licensed title or shovelware is the equivalent of being on the factory line. Constant, but not fulfilling. In fact, while the team was developing Chronos Twins and probably Zombie BBQ, some of them have credits for 2007's Imagine Animal Doctor. It's a safe bet to say that after Chronos Twins saw its release on October 18th, 2007, Enjoy Up had been or were beginning to develop BBQ. So, about a year and a half or less for full production. In the director chair this time was Julio. Granted, Enjoy Up weren't the brainchild for Red Writing. That honor goes to Gamic Entertainment, who co-developed the game alongside Enjoy. Strictly speaking, the idea was proposed by one man, Jose Manuel Iniguez. And this is where I'm going to throw the word allegedly out here, because I think that Jose may have allegedly copied himself. Or just allegedly reused an idea he already had. Ever heard of a game called Zombie Panic in Wonderland? It was developed by Aka Oni, who Jose was the director of. That's at least what the website AS says. Jose Manuel Iniguez is the director of Akioni Studio, the company that created the WiiWare video game Zombie Panic in Wonderland. His interest in video games began at a very young age when he discovered Capcom's famous arcade game, 1942. Under the credits for Wonderland, Jose is both listed as director and writer, with the title scene release on December 20th, 2007 in Japan for the Wii. Zombie BBQ would be released little under a year later in America on October 31st, 2008 for the DS. It took 2 years later for English-speaking countries to get Zombie Panic, but only as a WiiWare drop. Was this the stealth launch of a series that ultimately failed? Run it down. Both titles feature zombies in that classical fairy tale setting with corrupted characters acting as bosses. Momotaru is a playable character, an odd pick for a fairy tale character in BBQ unless a precedent had already been set, and the two have extremely similar gameplay. I'm not going crazier than I already am, right? Zombie Panic and BBQ aren't listed as sequels. One isn't called a spiritual successor for the other, but this goes beyond coincidental. It's funny because Julio drops this quote during the interview when asked why Enjoy Up chose the shoot 'em up genre for Zombie BBQ. That genre was chosen because Enjoy Up had experience with it, and although it is really very trite, it still has many options to exploit. On the other hand, Zombie BBQ puts a fresh spin on this genre by mixing it with the world of fairy tales and taking characters we all know and altering them in a bizarre new way. Oh yeah, and because I'm a guy who does his due diligence, or at least tries to, I'm calling out the Wikipedia page for BBQ as it's all sourced wrong. As in, they think the game came out in 2007, when no, it didn't, and I spent time in my life correcting dates because this means something to me. Anywho, since the DSI marketplace has gone the way of a certain bird, D-Smoo Me is your friend for BBQ. Another instance in the story isn't the selling point angle. The plot of Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie BBQ is that after the eponymous character's duel with the big bad wolf, Not only did the woodcutter die, but zombies have started sprouting up, spreading their infection, causing mayhem in the world of fantasy. It's one massive excuse for you to fight against familiar Grimm's fairy tale characters as bosses, and what the hey, throw in Santa and Godzilla because why not? This has less of a plot than, say, Katamari Damacy, and that's saying something. Still though, that isn't a knock because BBQ knows you're here for gameplay and doesn't try to present its tale as anything other than an excuse. To keep some aspect of this tab brief, the voice work of the game is barely worth mentioning. Red and Momo don't talk all that often besides at mission start and end and when selecting a weapon. With that out of the way, we are knee-deep in dead pixels. Terrible, no-good puns aside that make things more confusing rather than being funny, the graphical style of Zombie BBQ is split between 3D elements and 2D pixels, and you all probably know where this is going because of earlier videos, particularly the Pokemon Sapphire let's talk about. The GBA and DS were vehicles for stylish-looking titles, and BBQ is no exception. But where it goes above and beyond, remembering that this is an indie title, is that the game effortlessly blends 2D and 3D together. Most of the characters are intricate sprites that are wonderfully animated and designed. I'm a sucker for theming, and Little Red has it in spades. While the basic zombies in the starting graveyard look like your usual ghouls and goblins, green, decayed, and this side of the crypt, flash forward to World 3 and you have a bunch of Intalyid-inspired undead with their striped head shirts. Or in Tokyo, you have a number of Onryo or highly technological zombies looking like they belong as a mook in a tokusatsu to keep to the aesthetic. You are bound to find one that sticks out to you as there are so many. There's a prerequisite Michael Jackson parody with the red suit, a robotic jester belonging to the hordes of Santa Claus, Skullomania's out here creeping around, and many more. There's not a single boring looking enemy out of the regular roster, but if I had to give my favorite, it's probably the Vomiton. Before going into him, I don't know why a few of the zombies have pretty normal sounding names, either by design or location, but then you have Crusato, who are the maniacal skull throwers, or Cobra. A snake? Nope, a toy soldier laser turret, presumably made by an undead Geppetto and ridden out to St. Nick. Back to Vomiton, he's this weird big brain, exposed ribcage looking numpty rocking a nice pair of shades who casually spits bile at you. He's just a goofy little purple guy and I love him unless he's being body blocked by his fellows. I would also be remiss to not point out that the weakest of the lineup is called Stupid. Whereas all the normal zombies are these intricately laid out sprites, all the mini and normal bosses are 3D models. I love the practicality of this because it highlights which enemies are the more dangerous ones in a shorthand manner. Mobs like the Bomb Monster or Uruk Man grab your attention because they aren't flat characters, non-verbally telling you where to lay down fire. I will admit I don't like the 3D models as much compared to the sprite work. They do look a bit plain, but the bosses make up for it, at least to me. It hits the twisted fairy tale vibe that I fuck with. Thank you, American McGee and your Alice series. And while some of them are kinda just looking, Granny and Zomzilla are kinda bare minimum. Some of them are pretty great. The three little pigs vary based on which one you're looking at. Starting off, the first brother has fallen to the virus, his straw probably easily beaten down by the zombies. As such, the first brother is more beast than man, his zombification heightening his instincts as he turns his scythe to the living. The second brother, presumably the sticks builder, looks like a proper lumberjack, chainsaw and all. He's also nervous post his defeat, probably squished between a rock and a hard place of complete authoritarian nightmare and undeath. The third brother, Bricks, looks like a military leader and rules his land with an iron fist, preferring lockdown to wait out the zombies. A dictator through and through. Pinocchio is a two-faced fight where his first form looks more like a real boy that's been corrupted by the infection. Outside the gross mouthful club he has for an arm, he looks close to what he did pre-zombification. Gunning him down during 3-1, he comes back with a vengeance at the end of World 3 as a mechanical monstrosity. Pinocchio has reverted to being a puppet, strings controlling his even further corpse from the Ferris wheel as his upgrades wreak havoc. Despite joining the undead legions, Sleeping Beauty is still the fairest of them all, even if she's more than willing to bite your face off. The Big Bad Wolf is a pretty inspired take, seeing as he's a cross between presumed undead wolf and cyborg. He's called Lobocop in the ending crawl, so I can only assume he's part machine, asking the question what kind of virus this is. I can deal with whatever Umbrella puts out or the more magically inclined zombie recipes, as that isn't a spreadable infection most of the time. But if this is a techno-horror sort of dealio, like Soma, I think I would prefer the final sleep than being trapped in a shell. Despite all that, though, the Big Bad Wolf has a massively cocky demeanor that bleeds into his CGs. If the graphics were the first punch, the sound, specifically the music, are the second hit in the 1-2. This is a pretty banging OST from start to finish, offering a plethora of high-tempo tracks to get the blood pumping. Whether it be solid rock or bumping electric, all of it is good stuff, though I feel as if I have to highlight the drums as they practically make the backbone of the whole soundtrack. It feels like only two stages are without the backbeat, those being the screeching rhythms of Gretel's stages and the darkly whimsical melody of Pinocchio's levels, while all the rest of them have percussion front and center. Like, you get lulled into a pretty standard if rocking OST at the start with a graveyard track, but then you have some that sound absolutely menacing. I don't know which one I would describe as that more, Sleeping Beauty's or Saint Nick's world theme. As opposed to going with either synthesized strings or beats, the main instrument joining the drums for Beauty is a discordant bell/chime that gives the level set an eerie vibe while still keeping to the main idea of having a high-energy OST. Meanwhile, the murky synths of Santa's Workshop make it seem like the song is a dying Christmas carol, succumbing to the madness that is the infection. There's not a single bad level track, and the only weak parts of the OST are some of the ambient songs used for sections that aren't gameplay. And I can forgive those as they aren't meant to be as in your face compared to the themes. The only downside I can say is that, like with a lot of good video game music, it kinda suffers on its own without the adjoining gameplay. That's what separates good from great in my eyes. Let me say this. I think a lot of From Software music is good, but I don't go out of my way to listen to it. Meanwhile, I think a number of God Hands tracks are great, as I have listened to Sunset Heroes, Devil May Sly, and Please Mr. Sensei outside the context of the game. This is how my weirdly wired brain works, which in the context of today means that the presentation for Zombie BBQ is kick-ass and solid all around. Little Red Riding Hood Zombie BBQ, or some variation of Little Red, Red Riding, Zombie BBQ, or whatever as the full title is a mouthful, is an almost top-down 2D corridor shooter, closer to shmup like the Capcom-published 1940 series. The best example to pull from would be Contra, specifically the base levels from the original NES/arcade outing, if you want something that is familiar. Keeping to that territory, Zombie BBQ is that kind of retro throwback, so difficulty-wise, we're looking at, well, not Hardtack, but somewhere in the vicinity of a dry jawbreaker and Grandma's candy dish offerings. That's to say, hard, if a tad bit anachronistic and archaic. Before anything, though, we got a tutorial, yeah? It is the first thing that greets you after difficulty selection, but that's a separate discussion point I'll get into after controls. DS means touchscreen, but Red Riding does blend it with some regular analog controls. Getting ahead of myself, both display screens are important to the action. You probably could tell that by the way I've configured my layout differently from the last DS LTA, which was Dementium. Whereas the controls for that game were on the bottom while the top was the actual game, here the bottom and top screens are connected as a corridor. That is the structure of most regular levels. A jaunt from A to B, except for the boss levels where you have to stay in one spot, and the first level in the third world, it's a boss and level combo. Not to be confused with 4-1 and 4-2, which are levels that end with bosses. Worlds are a tri-piece affair, if you're wondering, 2 normal stages and a boss. Of course, that isn't always the case, as I mentioned, and to get to the later stages, you obviously have to beat the previous stages. That's also how your progress is checkpointed if you decide to quit out or die. Your progress is recorded globally, so when you load back in, you'll go to the world you left off at and will be able to pick either the next stage you need to complete, or go to a previous level in case you want to have a better run for the world. Dying, caused by bumping into anything, attacks or otherwise, sends you right back to the start of a level, so don't do that. Seriously, don't. That actually brings me to difficulty, as this plays a big part in structure. From the get-go, you have normal and hard with the usual trimmings that both those mean. However, only on hard and higher can you get to the true ending of the game. Also on hard and up, your status between levels isn't reset. So when going through a world on normal from stages, let's say 3-1 to 3-2 or 3-2 to 3-3, your health gets topped up and you retain any weapon pickups. That, as in regaining your health, doesn't happen on hard and the unlockable nightmare difficulty. What health you leave off at is what you bring to the next stage. That's why within worlds, you can jump back to a previous segment to do better. Be prepared to pause and quit out. You can already see how messy that is, I hope. Anyway, and back to how the world segments are laid out, you automatically move forward through each regular stage on rail style. The top and bottom screens are one, like I said, with your chosen character sticking to the lower third of the bottom screen. You can still position Red or Momotaru, the two playable characters, though outside of a reskin machine gun animations and quips, they are the same. As you see those quadrants below their feet following alongside them, that is what I will call the play space. You hit left or right on the D-pad, and Red or Momotaru will head in that direction unless they bump against the edge of the play space. Touching an exact square will have the duo quickly shift over to it. Technically handy if you need to dodge out of the way of something, and pressing left or right won't cut it. However, that means the stylus, or mouse in my instance, as I was using the same setup of controller and mouse to have button and bumper functionality alongside touchscreen usability, has to pull quadruple duty. That being shooting, equipping a different weapon, ducking, and moving. That's a lot, and since you have to touch either Red or Momotaru to duck, used to avoid certain attacks, which usually means you aren't laying down suppressing fire, I tended to never use stylus movement to free it up from one of the hats it has to wear. Your main method of attack is holding down the stylus to both shoot and aim. You point and hold in the direction you want to shoot, either to aim down the corridor and hit something far off in the distance, or you can basically press on an enemy to shoot at them if they are that close. Do mind, though, that based on where you're standing in the play space, your shots will be affected. Leading is important if you don't want to waste ammo, which is a funny thing to say when you have infinite ammo for the machine gun. What is this? Rise of the Triad? Of the 5 weapons, the machine gun is both the default and go-to option, having a limitless supply of bullets, but hitting for a relative pittance and having a magazine that needs to be reloaded by lifting up the stylus from the bottom screen. Learning the quirks and ticks of the machine gun is your key to victory, as 9 times out of 10, you only have it to fall back on since everything else is limited by pickups. Those are only found by destroying boxes, some of the time I might add, or by killing the random fish and cat combos that pop up occasionally at certain level thresholds. That's your only means of regenerating health, so you better not miss. None of the zombies drop any supplies for you, and while there are crates to smash up, there are also explosive barrels and drums that act as both an environmental aid and hazard. You, alongside your prey, can get caught in the blast if you're too close, and while the barrels don't leave behind any lingering flames, the drums do. And that's outside of stages having their own unique obstacles. Back to the guns, the shotgun is exactly what you think it is. Low cyclic rate and range, but heavy damage up close. It's not automatic, so only fires when you tap the bottom screen, but it can function as a semi-automatic that way as long as you have shells. It typically one-shots most threats, and even sterner stuff has a hard time recovering from a fistful of boomstick. It is the most common drop of the pickups outside of health and bombs, which are always given to you by the fish-cat delinquent duo. Speaking of bombs, when you have one stocked, double tap anywhere on the bottom screen to shoot one out. Great for crowd control, and its hitbox extends out and loiters for a bit longer than what the animation might seem. The flamethrower, a semi-rare commodity, has medium range, slotting in between the shotgun and machine gun / laser, but makes up for that singular shortcoming by being automatic, having great fuel economy, as in short controlled puffs save tons of ammo, and out-and-out flambéing any poor sod in its vicinity. The initial damage is insane, but what's more, it burns over time, hurling another helping of hurt on anything stupid enough to not immediately broil into cinders. The wonders of napalm. The last of the tools of the trade is the laser. Napalm to the nuclear option. One charge with a set amount of firing time, exceedingly rare to find, shoots right up the corridor and obliterates anything it hits, save for rough patches or bosses. Going over to what you'll use these weapons on, Zombies come in a few varieties, typically fodder that stick to melee and walk down the lane and off screen, ranged idiots that either stand in place for you to kill or will follow you up the path to pester you, and a selection of mid-tier enemies and mini-bosses that can blend between both styles. What I'm saying is that the normal zombie and all their versions exist to give room for the tougher threats like projectile users or the oddities when this grouping is acting as a standalone mini-boss. There's not too much strategy besides the good old strafe and shoot gospel that Doom has preached since '93, and that extends to the bosses. Just be wary of when you have to duck. Beating the game, at least on hard, unlocks Nightmare and the boss Butch, but that's it. You can't replay stages or worlds when you beat them, you have to begin again to do that. One thing I do have to give the game, besides the visuals and the OST, is that the secondary weapons are pretty fun to deploy. While the machine gun is a flaccid pea shooter that may get the job done, but in a manner that makes watching paint dry engaging, the same can't be said for the rest of the arsenal. While definitely outclassed by both the laser and flamethrower solely on range alone, when the shotgun hits its mark, it decimates what is caught in the spread. By far, on damage alone, is the shotgun the strongest weapon in the game. Look at how quickly it shreds Gretel and 2 of the 3 pigs. Even against Saint Nick or Zombzilla, the former's blizzard blades and the latter's slime spawns get mowed down in the blink of an eye. And those are bosses. Every other enemy that steps within its effective range gets splattered in 1 as opposed to 3. The only ones that can stand up to it are a few of the specialty mobs like the flaming skulls who will patches their way out of range, the wolfmen who tend to stay back, and the bomb monsters, and that's only because their explosive burst on death means you don't want to be standing parallel to them. Like, you can still use the shotgun on them, they're shredded by it, but they have an immediate retaliation move. It honestly feels like the team realized how bonkers this shotgun is, so to keep it from crashing the barbecue, not unlike a drunk uncle you barely know but everyone in your family has stories about, they made its range pitiful and have most bosses keep out of its blast radius. You still get a high number of drops for it, making it a go-to if you aren't stingy or trying to predict the boss of a world will get in range for a face full of boomstick. Didn't I already use that joke? The rarest of the additional guns, the laser, consistently is the best weapon in Red Riding Hood, whereas the shotgun and flamethrower are limited to an area in front of Red or Momotaru, the laser cuts down the corridor, hitting anything in its path for massive damage. It isn't blocked by environmental objects, it pierces through targets, and while it comes with supposedly 1 charge, you shoot the whoop for about 5 seconds, disintegrating any zombie or monster staring it down. Shoot. Remember that icon meme. It's a godsend for tough areas like in Italy 2, Sleeping Beauty's world in general, and Tokyo as well as bosses. Pick any one of them and it'll wreck their day, but it probably has the best effect against Beauty herself as you can line up the fairies and evaporate the trio, leaving their ward defenseless. Shout out to Beauty being my favorite boss, but more on that later. My favorite of the 3 secondary guns, the flamethrower, is what truly turns the game into a barbecue. Sitting in the middle child seat between the common shotgun and rare laser, the flamethrower screams hot death like you wouldn't believe. Ever played a title with a bad flamethrower? You spend too much ammo holding down M1 for mildly annoying an enemy and some weak damage over time effect. Modern Fallout's flamer, outside of its interpretation in London, it toasts the bread faster than you can say baked beans. The flamethrower from Alien Trilogy, specifically Killing Floor 1's flamethrower, it's better in 2 coming from a firebug, and about a dozen others you could yell at the screen as I don't want to run down a massive list. It's a genre of weapon that either extremely underperforms for balancing reasons, or fucks in every way possible. So what does one round of Puff Puff Pass get you in Zombie Barbecue? First off, ammo is time-based. You have to spray a firewall for a hot minute for Zombie Barbecue to consider fuel depleted. That means quickly tapping the flamethrower is the pro strat, as it grants a better fuel economy. Secondly, anything it touches turn to ash and dust quicker than Imagine Dragon's career. It hurts, aided by good range and inherent pierce, meaning if zombies are bunching up, the flamethrower is the go-to crowd clearer. You can be drowning in a sea of the undead, and one spurt of blazing destruction will see all your problems go away. And if the initial jolt of having a fireball thrown in the face doesn't take down a zombie, the thrower does have a slight DOT effect for a lasting bite. The only downsides to the flamethrower is that, like the laser, you'll be jonesing for it as its drops are inconsistent. Sometimes you'll get it in boxes, but it's about a fourth of the time, the shotgun and bombs taking up a fat 50% or what seems like higher, and the laser having an even lower percentage of appearance. And getting it as a catfish drop has its own caveats, as the bomb and health vial take higher priority compared to everything else from the twosome. For a good long while of my time with Red Riding Hood, I never knew where to place the bombs. They are made to seem like another Horde tool. You fire a bomb right in the middle of a sizable group and go about your merry way. However, since all the rest of the options are great at doing that, plus having high burst damage for the shotgun and flamethrower effectively clearing anything dangerous, the bombs kinda get left in a weird spot. That is until you fight the Flaming Skulls. Undoubtedly, they are the worst enemy in the game. They come in about 3 flavors, dance all around the screen, either bumping into you or sicking their fire spawns Galaxia style at you, which, depending on the version of Skull, approach you differently, and act as stopgap mini-bosses you have to defeat. One of the skulls is resistant to the flamethrower, though because of how quickly they move in and retreat, actually hosing one down mid-flight is a pain. Same goes for the shotgun, doubly so since it isn't automatic, making 2 timing harder than spraying and praying. The bomb still has to deal with that, as double tapping anywhere on the bottom screen will launch an explosive after a bit of a delay, but if you can perfect that aspect, it's a one hit on every skull. Just finding that out completely flips the script when dealing with them, as you are practically showered in bomb pickups, and the skulls become constant mini-bosses post their introduction. It's a massive health and resource drain to fight them otherwise, and once you notice the pattern they take when it comes to backing off, it's not hard to catch them in the sizable splash damage of a bomb. This isn't... what did James say? Pissing into a Dixie cup that's spinning on a record player tied to a cheetah's back. They get a whiff of the lingering hitbox and the skulls will start pushing daisies. Besides them and the laser turrets, as they are a massive pain when they begin sprouting up, I actually do like a number of the enemies, both because they're so varied, whether it be moveset or looks-wise, and they tend to complement each other. The basic zombie and its countless variants exist to soak up damage for back row support that will fling whatever projectile they have, or exist as body blockers for other melee threats. It would be solid design if not for the fact that restraint wasn't in the developer's vocabulary. A game can have a great lineup of mooks that serve in both form and function, but if you overindulge in numbers, that balance goes out the window. Take the... okay, all the enemies in the game have names, you see them in the credits, but they're all bizarre, so I'll use my own names for them. Mary Dolls. While other zombies will mindlessly walk forward and off-screen, the Mary Dolls will linger until death, moving around to dodge shots before slamming into the specific block you're at. It effectively means that you are having to pay attention to their specific callouts, which they are quite good at giving out, so you can avoid their punch while wading through other mobs that'll try to box you in, whether up close or from afar. Regular zombies have an aggro range while they'll beeline towards you, creating the dichotomy of do you shoot to kill or try to bait. It's all good, and adding enemies to this flowchart becomes what I think is the backbone of barbecue. Here's 5 Mary dolls together with no other enemies where the usual dance you have to partake in goes out the window. Canning my comments for bad. My favorite boss out of the grouping is Sleeping Beauty, as I said. Mostly because out of all the fights, it has an engaging angle to it. Beauty is only damageable when at least one fairy is down. There are 3 in total, and all do a different attack from the other, whether it be a basic energy ball, a segmented beam that tracks your position, or a close-range flamethrower you can duck. You can solo out the fairy you hate the most, but I had the most success balancing out the pain to each fairy. That way, when one dissipated, not only could I shoot and hurt Beauty, the other 2 fairies would fade out in their attempt to safeguard the princess due to their low health. It's a manageable juggling plate routine where you can practically keep the barrier protecting Beauty down for the whole fight as long as you're mindful of health values. It's more than a dodge attacks, shoot at it until it dies kind of boss like the rest are. That's not to say that I think all the bosses are bland. This game and its wonderfully grotesque visuals make sure of that, but there are fault lines running through the entirety of BBQ that cause it to shatter. Nintendo Horde is the name of the game, as unless you play Zombie BBQ on hard, you will not get the true ending. Are you told this up front? Nope! It's a complete and utter waste of time to choose normal since you don't get the finale as well as the additional goodies like the boss butcher extreme difficulty, but because you aren't told that from the start, if you do make it to the end on normal, here's a kick me sign that says play on a real difficulty. Not that playing on hard is any better. The fundamental flaws of LRHZ BBQ are ingrained into the core. For starters, no checkpoints and levels. That may not seem like a big deal, but this is tied into how level structure is laid out. You go through 3 levels in each world without resupplying. Whatever health and ammo you end up with by stage completion, you take that into the next level. So, say you end Tokyo with half health and very few bombs. Beginning Zombie City, you only have half health and very few bombs. Better hope you manage to survive to refill your health. God forbid you miss hitting the fish and cats in a stage that outright hates you with the amount of environmental hazards you have to circumvent and enemies to shoot that have erratic shot patterns. Oh, you died? Begin again. Or go back to Tokyo and play better so you can have a chance in Zombie City. Might I add that this is one of the modifiers to Hard and Higher? Yeah, this baffling design decision doesn't happen on normal, but you don't get the full experience, as I said earlier, when choosing that mode. It's as artificial as lowering player damage output and raising enemy health values. That sums up the challenge of Zombie BBQ, taking as little as damage as possible as the most aggravating set of enemies fill up the screen, giving you no room to breathe. And this becomes a catch-22 as well, as you want to use the specialty weapons to deal with certain threats, but maybe the boss will need those as well, so you can't use too much, making you juggle between the now and future, and if you don't hit the sweet spot, go back to start. You have to predict what you might need, leading to situations where you hold on to ammo thinking you might be able to quick kill a boss, like Gretel or 2 of the 3 pigs, but wind up in a situation that you can't do that. Despite looking to be right in your face, Mecha Zombzilla is too far away from the shotgun's effective range. So all that time you spent using the machine gun and getting dunked on? Yeah, you could have saved yourself the heartache and will now either have to play perfectly, which isn't feasible to people not named Shadow Surge, hint hint, Zombzilla, and Lobocop. Don't ask me how I beat Pinocchio. Or more often than not, go back to a previous stage and not screw up. That's cool and fine and not at all frustrating. especially when a stage is laid out like a minefield. Besides the flaming skulls that I've already gone over, what will be the fly in the ointment are any of the stages that feature some form of indestructible hazard or laser turret. Sometimes working separately, sometimes tandemly, all the time a blight on your conscience because just restraint, please. Santa's workshop is the other nightmare next to Zombie City. There's a difference between challenging yet fair and making the floor lava and flowing the player in while a bunch of imps hurl pitchforks for good measure. If you aren't constantly firing at the laser turrets or zombies while trying to maneuver around whatever barbecue is sending your way, whether it be giant snowballs, electro gates, or spinning batons, prepare to eat a shit ton of damage and potentially restart in the attempt to not be boned for the next level. Hold down the trigger and keep firing, is what I would say if you didn't have to reload the machine gun. That little wrinkle actually adds a whole lot to the artificial difficulty. You have to keep trajectory and angling in mind in Red Riding, otherwise you could be wasting precious ammo in the magazine and not laying down as much hurt as you want. It's partly why I dislike Zombzilla and Lobocop with the passion of a shitload of fuck. Excuse my inner AVGN, but losing DPS on either is a recipe for disaster. Added ingredients being the aforementioned modifier that hard and higher weighs you down with, and some truly perplexing hitboxes on attacks. Zombzilla Phase 1 is manageable so long that you have at least half health or higher, some ammo for the shotgun, and patience. His most dangerous attack is the slime spawn, as while you can clear the spawns of the machine gun, you have to be more aware of your placement with it than the shotgun. His bubble attack, another move to watch out for, doesn't grant you iframes when you bump into the sides. However, it leaves him wide open, so you want him to do it. It is bollocks, however, that if it wants to, it can just hit you with no recourse. Yet, when you clear out Zombzilla's health bar, it refills to start Phase 2, Mecha Zombzilla. That's why you want to have half health or higher going into the boss, as if you have less or take too much from Form 1, reset. All of Mecha's attacks suck, either because they grant you no room to actually hit him, his Supernova and Clamp, or have deceptive hitboxes. The real malignancy of Mecha Zombzilla is that his slams are this side of improbable to dodge and are his main attack. I never knew why I either dodged or got hit, because when I did the same thing, I.E tried to shuffle out of range, it was a coin toss on whether I would be pancaked or not. And since you're having to move around so much, your shots fly wild and you end up wasting ammo for the machine gun, leading to losing precious seconds of DPS. DPS affected by the reload mechanic, which is just... why? This isn't tactical, we're one step above Metal Slug here, so forcing me to stop firing and wait enough time for an enemy to shift behavior serves more as an albatross bound around the neck than anything else. You have to consciously let go of the touchscreen, which when you're in the middle of a war zone and trying to outpace damage, it tends to slip the mind. What really makes Mecha Zombzilla the piece de resistance of a fight is that his ranking on the Mohs scale can fluctuate wildly. I have 2 recordings of the final bosses, one where I did them legitimately, the other testing out their mechanics and trying an experiment because, why not? Depending on the cycle he gives you, you can either breeze right through the mecha portion of the Zombzilla fight, or you can ram your head in repeatedly into the wall for hours on end and get no headway. The crux is if he decides to double slam. If you thought the active frames on his regular pounds were bad, the double slams are on a whole different level. I don't know what the breakdown of them is frame-wise, but the reaction speed needed to attempt to avoid them is high above most people's. Typically, if you don't get hit by the first of the 2, chances are the second one will, because it comes out just fast enough to catch you. The actual animation can be calculated in frames, which is the measurement of your dodge. Safe to say, unless you find the sweet spot, as there's no way in any reality that you're going to try and dodge by stylus picking, as that's unintuitive and has about an equal success rate, you'll be clubbed to death in a matter of moments if you didn't enter this half with full health. Or, as I said above, you can take a nap with Mechazilla as he gives you the laziest attack pattern that ensures you'll gun him down before your health hits 0. There's no telling with his AI, a problem with even the bosses I like from BBQ, which is a big issue when you can't predict which set of moves he's going to do until he does them, which is usually too late. Effective dodging goes out the window. We call this a coin flip and is the extreme height of artificial difficulty. I would class this under the same poppycock as a number of one-hit kill moves in some RPGs, or Unreal, seeing as I've been watching CV11's catalog again, or truly luck-based shenanigans. Kagemura in Tag Force 1 with the Fairy Box for my clue answer, or Ordeal of the Traveler, or really any trap card that is based on calling a category right. Hope my neighbors and the members of the inner circle got a kick out of that one. That's why I tested an idea for the jokes and ha-has of it. Remove the need to reload the machine gun so you can keep firing. The answer I got from this was that not only was the scant few seconds of letting go of the touchpad a big factor in your DPS management, as in life or death in some situations, the real killer of Little Red is that it's all one big chicken game. Damage boosting is your friend in this parasitic relationship. It stops being about trying to understand a boss's moveset and employ evasive maneuvers, and becomes seeing how much damage you can deal while invuln is up as whoever is going through their routine. And I can say this because, as an unfortunate side effect of hard mode's player penalty, I had to do this against Pinocchio. Guess I'm running back what I said earlier about not asking me. Pinocchio is not an easy boss by far. When you fight him, he's probably the hardest to go up against, only being dethroned by Zombzilla and the true final boss. But what separates him from his brethren is that unlike the Tokyo Ghoul or Lobocop, the real boy has a moveset that can be understood and dealt with because it is far from illegible. I can understand why I took damage because his attacks operate in a clear way. The slight hint of randomness that Pinocchio has are the trajectories of his electric shockwaves, which bounce, meaning they can be predicted, his stakes, which have drop shadows, and his pointy nose, which tends to hit where you are or where you might be going. Was it fun having to do a no damage run of Pinocchio? Fuck no. That's a valid complaint labored at the artificialness of hard and higher. I can make any game harder, pluck out my own eyes, bash my hands in with hammers, stick needles in my ears. That's hard, isn't it? Tying one arm behind the player's back for a terribly arbitrary reason? Can perfecting Pinocchio be done by an average player? Yes, unlike Zombzilla and Big Bad Wolf, where it felt like taking damage was unavoidable by design and was an excuse to play Reflect Bounder, Lobocop might be the clearest demonstration of this. As a hard mode and higher fight, he fits the same bills as Zombzilla, but whereas the man in the suit wannabe had a limited pool of attacks ranging from unreadable to questionable, his tail whip is so pathetic, the Big Bad Wolf has a plethora of moves, some up close, others ranged, that he cycles through that you have to keep track of. Mostly because depending on what hits you, that's either a boon for your DPS or an immediate restart. Lobo's projectiles, outside of their speed and lingering hitboxes, are somewhat easy to avoid, and even if they do hit you, they deal scratches, and because their animations are so long, you'll cycle out of them with invulnerability while belting out a barrage of bullets. Wolf's HP is high, and all you have are 3 bombs and the machine gun to whittle him down, but all his gunshot patterns might as well be a flag sticking out of the barrel. His up-close tri-shot is the Wolf's simplest move, and the only times you should get hit by it is if you aren't paying attention. The long-range shockwave orbs sit in that same ballpark. You merely have to keep track of where you're standing to trick his shots into giving you space. The only BS move in this bunch are his zigzag shots due to their trickiness. The core idea to avoiding them is to alternate left and right as you're about to get hit, to sidestep them, but it's so specific that unless you spend an ungodly amount of time dedicating yourself to the frame data of the game, you'll be hit. But it's his longest attack by a country mile, and he doesn't move while doing it, so you can retaliate with no recourse from the Rolf. All his projectile attacks are like this, so if you ever bumble into one of them, congratulations, you'll trade health because you get about 5 free seconds for damage. It came to a point where I would willingly eat a hit to get some precious time to hurt Lobocop while he was vulnerable, which is just the pinnacle of boss design now, isn't it? This applies to everyone if you have the health to spare, and could be considered optimal as bullets fly truer in a straight line, especially since most bosses, if they don't have a predefined weak spot like Phase 1 Third Pig, can be freely damaged without any worry. Why you should bother to avoid the BBW's attacks, though, is because his melee options, most of his melee options, his ground arms exchange damage for unpredictability, but are functionally a ranged attack, deal, roughly a fourth of your health. Chicken game, as if you soak up too many stray orbs, he'll decide your death with his spin. That is, of his up-close moves, the only one you have to pay attention to. His lightsaber strike and his claw slashes are laughably lackadaisical and require you to simply have a working brain cell to sidestep. Spin to win comes out at such speed that if you can dodge it, you're either a predictive matrix or a new type. There's no tell for it either. He does it whenever his AI cycles to it, but you won't know that until he kicks up a tornado. A problem adjacent to all the bosses, if I might add. Tangent. None of them have set patterns besides Gretel and Pinocchio 1. So when they do a move, they don't give a prior warning unless it's a telegraphed attack like Granny's Ram. But even then, that's during the attack. She's still equally likely to choose a different move without telling you, and you only know it's the Ram because she gives you the direction to dodge towards. That means instead of relying on pattern recognition, AI behavior, telegraphing, literally any design element you can think of that gives the player a fighting chance against enemy NPCs, it's all random. A roulette table that the AI gambles on to determine what they will do. Speaking of spinning, Lobo's top spin can be used either at the start of the fight, halfway through, right when he needs it to game over you, whenever. That's why I said to restart if he even does it, because getting struck once by it puts you so far behind the 8-ball that any light in your life is eclipsed by it. Gods above and below help you if he decides to do it twice. But the inverse is also true. He can decide to never do it, so we go back to the Mo scale with an inconclusive reading. As I said though, Nintendo Horde, which can be traced back to how a lot of early console games were, though apparently this trend stuck enough to last well into the 7th generation of consoles, designed with the arcade mindset. Nickel and dime the player for a resource, whether it be money, time in this instance, or in the words of SpongeBob, some other third thing. I guess, sanity. Look at CV11's Pro Series. Look at Devil May Cry and other character action games. Soulsborne. Games that offer a challenge, but treat the player with a modicum of respect. That's what Zombie BBQ is lacking. As a novelty, I think there is some merit to Little Red Riding Hood Zombie BBQ. The presentation is front-loaded with a hefty blend of neat sprite work, solid 3D models for the DS, and rocking music. I love themed enemies and the title has it in spades, and conceptually speaking, I do like a lot of the character designs. Too bad that games are an interactive medium, as all the faults for BBQ lie in that area. Hard to get true ending is beyond archaic, and not warning the player up front about it is a cardinal sin to me. You are only told either A, by beating normal and getting the text prompt, or B, you know about it from the get-go, which means you've either beaten the game before or have this cursed knowledge. And even playing hard isn't so much a challenge, but an exercise in artificial misery. On normal, BBQ already has issues with wonky hitboxes on boss attacks, impossible odds whether through sheer enemy density or AI randomness, bizarre bouts of unclear difficulty, and dickish level design. So playing hard just exacerbates all these problems. A clear contender for demonstrating how very few games understand how to design a hard mode. This isn't Postal 2 or Jedi Fallen Order. It's a skip from me, dog, though if you want to try it out against my recommendations, get yourself D-Smoo Me and see how BBQ treats you. Zombie Panic in Wonderland is another interesting case, seeing as it was a WiiWare title that was ported to the 3DS for whatever reason. Oh, and unexplainably, Marvelous Entertainment handled the original run on the publishing side for the Wii, while Arc System Works published the 3DS release. But only in Japan. Panic was self-published in America and Europe by Akaoni, but not until 3 years later from the Japanese release. So 2010 is when English speakers got it. I wonder why it was stuck in, I guess, publisher hell for that long. Especially in the era of the Wii and DS, where you could just dump whatever you wanted on those consoles. Nintendo wasn't picky. Vinesauce is a treasure trove of, here's an awful game you've never heard about plopped right onto the Wii and DS digital storefront. So, why the time gap? I have far more questions than I do answers, and that annoys me to no end. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels, where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder, or don't, I ain't your Uncle Remus. And as always, this showing of Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie BBQ is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. The strange PlayStation 1 adaptation of the card game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories.